We all know there's an advantage to being the home team, to playing at home. And at LGKG, we have been your home team for over 90 years.
We're more than just a law firm. We're your friends, your neighbors, an advocate when life takes an unexpected turn.
We're not just lawyers that practice law. We live in this community, just like you.
When you need us most, we're at our best.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Your podcast studio fans. We're here at the pickleball facility, great facility. We thank them for letting us do this podcast. I'm Mark Elisco. I am not the host of this show, but I have been flattered to be asked to be on this show. I'd like to introduce to my left here, doctoral candidate Michael Pascarella. Mike Pascarella is from the University of South Carolina, and this gentleman has been involved in the educational profession almost his entire life. Probably the most impressive thing about him is that he is going to be a PhD or doctoral recipient probably by the spring at his age, which is so admirable.
Thank you, Mark.
But the most impressive thing here is that Mike has his entire life has dedicated his life to the study of the issues that confront our country. And he's been running seminars. He's been a professor at UNC, and the discussion is quite a bit in his classes. So what he's done is he's come up with this idea of having this podcast called The Elephant in the Room. So let's have you talk about how you came up with this idea, the elephant in the room, and which I think is a great idea.
Thank you, Mark. Mm-hmm. Actually, I want to thank you as the mayor of Newcastle. I'm privileged to have you on my podcast to introduce it. We've been friends for over 50 years.
Right.
And there's a lot of commonality. Mm-hmm. And I also want to thank Ron Mounts as the producer of your podcast. He's done so much for me, and I appreciate it. Now, to answer that question, there are several elements that go into that. One of which actually ties Mark and I have a relationship in this. His father impacted his career today, that he's as a mayor. Literally gave him some ideas and encouraged it. My father, in a similar way, encouraged me, I think, in the first initial ideas of how I should handle discussing elephant in a room type topics. See, my father was a Republican in a Democrat community. And he was,
Well, he was from Laurel. A lot of Republicans in Laurel.
well, no,
but
he was Newcastle.
He was Mahoneytown, correct?
No,
Oh, no.
Croton Avenue.
Croton
Well,
Avenue, okay.
pretty close, very good. And what's interesting, he came from a Catholic background, right? And my grandfather actually converted over, he became a Protestant, and my dad just kind of floated as far as religion was concerned. But one of the things he taught me is how to discuss religion and politics in community. We would go down to the south side where all the merchants were that he dealt business.
That's right, I remember.
You remember that, right?
Sure.
And he would talk with Simon Blah, who owned the clothing company.
Yes.
And I would go in and I'd listen to them. And their conversations were, they were poles apart, okay? But they never argued.
Yes.
And I had an opportunity to witness that. And then we go down a little further and we would visit with the next, and they were Jewish. Mm-hmm. So I'm learning, okay, this is my faith, as I considered myself a Christian. Mm-hmm. But I can share things just like my dad with others. So here I am, 50 years beyond that, 60 almost, beyond with my father. And, as a Christian, I hold my faith with a sincere belief in what, I've been taught. And I also have a Baptist background, and I have a religious degree, an undergraduate degree in religion. Mm. But to make a long story short there, what I noted about my dad is he set the framework for this. So I was open to other religions. And I was part of the Model Arab League at the university that I attended in Augusta State University.
Wow.
I facilitate a Holocaust class every summer for the last 3 years with a professor from the University of South Carolina. And I enjoy that, and I enjoy talking to people. So I think it gave me the first concept of, what? You can share difficult, ideas. You can share difficult
In a diplomatic way.
in a diplomatic way.
We've
And-
lost that in our country
Well,
today.
I
It's
want to recover that. And I believe my heart is geared on that as a ministry. So I take this podcast not only as social involvement and discussing political issues,
Sure.
but sharing my faith as well.
Would you think that, we grew up in the 60s and 70s, and we had a lot of investing, or we were invested more. We were more socially conscious, I believe. And I think the reason was because of, the Vietnam War hung over our heads. And it was in
Oh.
our paper every day. And that's
Okay.
the only way
You and
we got
I
to
were
know.
right there on the cusp
We
of
were
that,
right
right?
there. Well, they quit the draft of the Vietnam War in November of my senior year.
Remember, we're the exact same age.
Yeah, so, I had great concern. And in those days, I read the paper every day from the time I was 11 or 12 years old. So I was up, and not just the sports. I'm talking cover to cover. Every morning I'd get up, I lived by Road Store. I'd get up in the morning, I'd put my 15 cents down, cut the paper, bring it home before school, and I would read the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I did that every day. So I think we were more, not only me and you and me,
Right.
I think all of us are that generation. We were more socially conscious. And then when Kent State erupted in May of 1970, it really made us even more socially conscious.
I think so.
Yeah.
And when Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated, and the Kennedy was assassinated before
Absolutely.
that
Great
really
point.
elevated, my social and conscious awareness of
No
things.
doubt.
And I was concerned then. I'm even more concerned today about the disparity between the two parties and the attitudes that exist. So that's going to bring me, I'd like to elaborate now. Since I mentioned my father, it wasn't just that alone that made me feel that there's a need today. Actually, as I was getting older in my educational field, I had an administrator call me a sage on the stage.
Right.
And I didn't know what, I knew what it meant, but I didn't know what they were referring to. And really, I was just going into the classroom as a know-it-all, and I had that Croton background, so I already had the know-it-all built into me. And I just fed into the students rather than letting the students reciprocate. And it was my way of managing a classroom. And now I realize it's a transformation process. That's not necessarily the best way to teach. It is a way to teach, but there are other ways. I wasn't open to those.
Yes.
So that awareness was taking place in 2014, and change was on the horizon for Mike Pascarella.
And it becomes a cliche, a sage on the stage.
Right.
Because what happens is that you are the facilitator of all knowledge, without understanding that the students have feedback and they can educate
Awesome.
you as well. But there's a balance there, because they're still looking for you as
Right.
the expert of the subject, but at the same time, they want to be able to give that input in their analysis too.
I call it guided instruction.
Guided
I
instruction.
don't even call it a lecture anymore.
Yeah.
So if I spend 20 minutes on that guided instruction, I can expect that they can, hopefully I'm giving them the instruction along the way, how to do an activity. I want to see something. I never taught social activities, even though I taught social studies. I didn't teach social justice.
Yeah.
Because I was so engrossed in teaching the skills for them to pass a test.
Thinking about how history was taught back in schools, and it's gone away a lot in public schools today, which is a shame. Because you don't, if you're just teaching from a textbook, history,
Correct,
okay,
correct.
you're just teaching you're getting a generic version. You have to have background yourself. You have to do personal background, personal learning, so that you're able to bring human lives into the sweeping events that occurred throughout history.
And a changing context of the time. How do we fit into those today?
Yes. Yeah, you can't understand the world today without understanding the past. There's no way.
Right.
For you to understand the present, you have to understand the past.
Right.
For you to make decisions on the future, you have to understand the present. And that's why history is so important. And we're not talking about myth history. We're talking about real history.
Verifiable, yeah.
Factual history. There's a difference.
I love it.
Because people are still associated with the myths of American history.
If you don't mind, can I interject here?
Yes,
This is
I want
perfect.
you to.
I'm a little further, we're ahead of ourselves in the sense that I wanted to bring this in later, but I love it. The gap that I always felt was in regards, when we talked about American history, and it's going to fit right into my episode. The topic tonight, the episode that we're going to be getting into and discuss it, is really, do we, and this is political and religious, do we Christianize, which is the political, which I really know you can speak to, or do we evangelize? And this is where the church has to look at the Great Commission and say, if we're Christianizing, which to me is Christian nationalism, where we're taking and imposing the will rather than discussing the will of the people.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're exactly right. I think, and I don't want people to take me wrong.
Oh, go ahead.
Because I respect all religions, not just my
Well,
religion.
we've talked,
Okay,
yes.
I respect all religions. But religion should never be imposed. It should be endorsed. It should be so good that people say, yeah, I like this religion, I'm going to embrace it. It should be endorsed. Christian nationalism, which I believe is a threat to this country, doesn't do it. They impose their views. And that's offensive to a lot of people, and I think that's how people get into a lot of arguments over it.
That's where okay, so I realize, actually my dissertation encompasses what you're talking about. And I feel strongly about it. I'm not saying that these people don't have faith. I'm just saying that particular area, we all need to be challenged in some areas of our faith so we can improve.
Yes.
And that's an area that I feel I want to inform, not dictate, not
dictate.
teach, inform. And I like you on this panel with me
Yeah,
today.
well, we're talking about endorsing rather than imposing, and that's a key sentiment. That is, but my train of thought has left me for a second. But if you take a look at the history of this country,
Right.
obviously, yes, obviously. the myth has always been that this country has been built on Christian biblical principles. But if you really look at the facts, that's not really true. But let me go here. Let me go here. Let me say this. Let me give an example. Okay, a lot of the southern schools, especially, are demanding that Bibles are in the classrooms. And that the Ten Commandments are on schools and things like that, okay? And here's where there's common ground, okay? I've always believed this. No matter what faith you are,
Right.
you cannot deny that religion is a major force in this world.
Correct.
And you can't understand other people's values, cultures, mores, values. You can't understand it without understanding their religion.
Right.
So I've always wondered, why do schools not simply offer the world's religions as an elective for their students? Why not? Why are they not studying Judaism? Why are they not Why are they not studying the Hindu faith? Why are they not studying Christianity?
Right.
This way you have an understanding.
Actually, in sixth grade, I taught sixth grade and seventh grade, and we did incorporate that into our social studies book, but it was very, very selective. There wasn't
Sure
a
it
lot
is.
to discuss. Actually, you could probably teach that in a week or two. This is a project, I think, that could be taken up, and I think schools are providing religion courses as electives. But it goes back to what you're saying. You know, if you're going to teach religion in a school as an elective, you're going to have to incorporate
All religions.
All religions.
All religions.
That's right.
You know,
Because we're in a political arena in that sense.
Sure you are.
Yeah.
Because we have a diverse culture. No matter how you cut it, we have
Right.
a very diverse
Right.
culture. We have in our schools, believe me, we have Asians who are Buddhists, right?
Right.
You have Hindu, we have Indians in our
Right.
school. We have Jewish people in our school, and we have Christians. So when you're saying that I'm going to put the Bible in every single classroom, you're imposing your views on them. That's not right. And the way to get around it is to teach with respect
Sure.
all the world's religions. And then you can have the Bible in you can have the Quran in the school.
I understand.
You can have all them.
And here's where I think some of it went awry. When we talk about America, a lot of the textbook companies, okay, yes, in 1621 you want to talk about the Pilgrims, the religious influence, but by the 1800s, by 1775, there was a different form. There wasn't Puritanism around. The Calvinist was kind of mummified. Now you have a secular version of Christianity. You and I have talked about this many a
Yeah.
times. And that secular version was part of what the Founding Fathers built a democracy upon.
The Founding Fathers looked at the 17th century colonies of the Pilgrims and Puritans and saw that what they were developed was not, they didn't escape for freedom of religion. They left England and the Netherlands for starting their own religious societies in the 17th century here in Americas. And the Founding Fathers looked at that, and they found out that it was very strict. There was a lot of executions. There was a lot of torture if people did not believe in their religion. So the Founding Fathers came up with the concept that in order for you to have freedom of religion, you had to have in the government freedom from religion. Then you have freedom of religion. Now, a lot of people misinterpret that. They think, well, then you have a godless country. No, you don't. It has nothing to do with that. What you have is the government itself is freedom from religion.
Right.
They're not making any decisions on religion in order to ensure freedom of religion.
What you end up happening when you commingle religion and politics, you have the demise of religion. I would say the demise of what we call our faith, Christianity. If I'm talking to the church people today that are in my audience today, in your audience today, I think you have to realize that the church is a spiritual entity. Mm-hmm. When you bring in secular ideas, you got to be careful. Tertullian and Origen, the earliest church fathers, they eschewed the idea of mixing the two together. They felt a Christian should be dedicated to his vocation. His calling was to serve God.
Right.
Okay? To serve Christ. It wasn't to serve a nation. That's why they tolerated Rome because they realized my citizenship is not here, my citizenship is in heaven.
Yeah.
Therefore, I tolerate things that I will not have to tolerate in the future. They look forward to the second coming, not to resurrect and revolt against Rome. They never. Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world.
Right.
So you keep it separate. And that's what
Well, that's what Thomas Jefferson said
Yes.
many times, and in his letters, he talks about there needs to be a separation, a wall between religion and government.
So you and I can have this discussion in a civil way. And actually, this is what the whole purpose. And what was happening in my life, I was so politically minded. I could see it impacting the fact that I was performing. I wasn't really, was I praying? Was I really seeking God? Or was I so interested in watching the news, the media? Was it manipulating my thought process? And, I was becoming somewhat of a bitter person. The older I got, the more bitter. And I was teaching a Bible study on crazy love once, and I realized, you know what? Do I love people? Or am I getting into an environment as an us culture, us versus them?
Yes.
I didn't want that. And I wanted to pull up here in a minute, when Ron gets back, we'll pull up the actual uniqueness of this podcast, why it's unique. And I literally wrote goals and set boundaries so that the podcast, will follow into the guidelines.
Of all, not only this one, but all of you.
All of them. All of
your
them will fall.
podcasts.
And that's why I have this little elephant here, so that it's going to be a symbol. If I get derailed, in which, I trust you. I don't think there's anything you could ask me, and I thought about it, anything that you could ask me that would derail our talk. But if in the future, if it happens, this elephant will go in the room, and Ron's right here, and I'd like him to put the flyer that I had. Here's the format. And a friend of mine wrote this for me. There are topics we don't like to discuss, conversations we don't like to have. We call these elephants in the room, but there are many more, and we will discuss them all.
That's pretty good.
You like that?
I like that.
Some
You
of
know
my
why?
future.
Because when you say that, there are conversations that we don't like to have, and that's because people take it personal.
Right.
And they get upset with each
Oh,
other.
I love that. Thank you.
And it's sad because I have people in my life who I love dearly, but they don't want to talk to me about that. And because and I try to explain to them that, look, no, all we're looking is for common ground here. I respect what you're saying. You have to respect what I'm
Right.
saying. But a lot of people have a hard time with that.
You're absolutely.
Conversations they don't like to have.
So let's go ahead to the next stop. And so I took a little. We developed this podcast to take the topics that we dread to discuss because we don't want that. We don't want that negative feedback. I'm very sensitive, and I don't like negative feedback. And make them palatable to discuss using conversational talk. I don't think we've elevated our talk beyond conversational. I hope not.
No.
About these topics with anyone. To do that, we need goals and boundaries. So I established some, and I felt that these are as fair as I can become to when I say speak the truth. Well, truth is a difficult thing for some people. Like, whose truth? My truth? Your truth?
Right.
So I say, let's honestly try to avoid hidden agendas because that is the biggest culprit, right, to truth.
Yeah, but and obviously, I think the point you're trying to make is that no matter who you have on here, there's not a hidden agenda for that person or for you. What you're doing is you're discussing the things that divide us today, but you're doing it in a respectful way, where that you're respecting his opinion and that person's respecting your opinion.
We can
And
agree
then
to disagree.
That's how you find common ground.
And every effort is made. I think that the viewer doesn't feel that this show is threatening in any way.
Right.
That it's creating that us versus them mentality. And that's one of the key factors here. The next one, I believe, is beyond speak the truth. I want to have, and I think we're doing this. We're having a frank discussion We're examining the ideas from all angles. The guest speakers is invited. I oft ask many a times, Mark, and you have, put in your 2 cents into this, right? Don't make it just be mine.
I've never been known not to.
Factual content. Every effort's made to inform without making spurious claims. One thing I don't like, cyclical arguments.
Oh, no, there's
I know
no
you
point
don't.
in it.
No
Yeah.
point. And I want to avoid that. And then every effort is to inform without making, the boundaries. Boundaries are designed to prevent dishonoring others. Self-promotion or starting a circular, frustrating discussion. And these are, which lead to an argument, these are all talked about. If you read 1 Corinthians 13, 2 Timothy. So those of you that are looking at this from a church perspective, I feel you're impelled to want to have this kind of a discussion.
You know, and you say that leading to anger. And you know, again, we're history guys.
Right.
Okay? We're history
Right.
guys. And I've been a student of history my whole life. And obviously, there's this country's so divisive today, and it really shouldn't be, because there are other issues throughout our history that what made it more divisive than
yes,
today.
yeah.
And everybody believes Abraham Lincoln. If you took a poll, who's one of the best presidents, a lot of people would say Abraham Lincoln. And Abraham Lincoln talked about, at a time that was so stressful and divisive,
Yeah.
he talked about the better angels of our nature. Remember that quote he said?
No,
he
go
did,
ahead.
yeah. In his second inaugural, he talked about that one day we will give back to the better angels of our nature.
Okay.
And I that resonates with me today. Like, when are we going to do that? When are we going to get back together with the better angels of our nature? Because it's there, it should be.
Yes.
And we're not. We're very divisive. You know, I mean, whenever you talk about Trump and people that are on the left, you know, they don't even look for common ground between the two.
No, actually, no. You're right.
You know? Obviously, and I say what my sentiments are. I'm a Democrat, and I believe in the democratic principles, and I'm not a Trump guy. But nevertheless, he's president of the United States.
You have to respect
He's
that.
president of the United States.
It's-
I respect the office.
Yeah.
Okay? I don't have to, you know, there's an old saying, we talked about this. Love of country, always. Loyalty to government when it deserves it. And I believe that.
Right.
Okay? I don't have to be loyal to the principles and the policies of Donald Trump. But I love and respect this country and the office of the presidency.
Right.
So therefore, we shouldn't be divisive in our thoughts. And if I could share one other thing too, another thing, and I want you to think about this.
Sure.
Another thing that when I look at our country today and I see how divisive it is, and it really shouldn't be, I think about Bobby Kennedy. Bobby Kennedy's his favorite poet, if you remember who it was Aeschylus. You know? And Aeschylus said something, and he said it in times of divisive times.
Right.
And Bobby Kennedy used to quote this all the time. And he said, even in our sleep, pain, which cannot forget, falls drop by drop upon the heart until our own despair, against our will, comes wisdom through the awful grace of God. Where's the wisdom today?
Oh, yeah.
Where's the wisdom today?
My sentiments.
Bobby Kennedy's, that was his favorite saying throughout the 60s, you know? And it rings true today. You know, and I don't like our country being this divisive. And I have my strong opinions, but I don't like our country being divisive like this.
I think you're bringing up my last point of why I went this way. I told you I was political, and I was struggling about 2014, right? 2015, I watched the debates.
Which
And
ones?
The presidential debates. For
13?
2015.
Oh, 15,
Yeah.
okay.
In
That's
2015
Hillary and,
Well, yeah, just the whole, I watched every debate, right? And yes, it was involving Hillary, it was the Republican debates, and then it became the presidential debate. But what I noticed, and it was both sides, you know, there was harshness in that. There was criticality, and I was taking a democratic theory class at the time. And I remember writing my last paper for that class, and it was a graduate, doctoral level class, that if the Republican Party remains on this same track throughout, We'll never resume basically coming back to what debates were all about in the beginning. That would not have, those debates would not have, to me, been successful. Now, there have been debates throughout history. I know that they were very, very violent. But there was personal issues involved here. And when you make a debate personal, it's only going to go in one direction. It doesn't matter which side starts it.
Right.
It's only going to go, and there were terms being thrown around by even Hillary Clinton about, the deplorables. Remember that statement,
Sure,
right?
yes.
Well, you call people those kind of names, and what do you expect? So I wanted to break away from that because I was really feeling like depressed over all this. Where am I going to go from here? I started my dissertation in 2018, right? And it came up as a topic. Well, Mike, why don't you talk about your transformation from that teacher-centered approach to a more student-centered approach, and look at the cultural aspects, your place where you grew up, and bring that in. What made you come to these decisions that you did early in life, and actually then later in life, and now I'm going to get a chance to talk about that transformation. And hopefully it'll get published, and like I said, hopefully I'll graduate in May. And
Sure.
if I do, I plan to continue the podcast and continue the research even outside of
Well, yeah,
the
and
university.
this is I think this is a wonderful type podcast because you're hitting all the issues that face our country. So the spectrum is so wide. Right now we're on history and Christian nationalism, things like that, and where this is going. But there's so much out there that you can discuss in this type of podcast. So much.
Like some future ideas would be, what's going to be the future of the Middle? Is there a future of peace in the Middle East? See, I have an opportunity to look at the political and the religious and put it together. I plan on having a seminary professor that I know, and I'll take the political side on this and let him discuss the from a Christian perspective, from a Jewish perspective, and take those pieces, and then even bring in the Palestinian ideas. I think these things have to be discussed.
Well,
Let me one more thing.
Go ahead. No.
When I was vice president of the Model Arab League, okay,
Say that again.
vice president of the Model Arab League, okay, and really what we did, we sat, as the Model Arab League, representing each different country, and one of the countries one year was Saudi Arabia. So you had to draw conclusions, not with an American, vision of what the world should be like. I had to understand, okay, an Arab perspective. And they have different ideas regarding, like, benchmarks that you set to get something accomplished.
That's why you have to study their religion.
And so therefore, if you do not know the religion, the business practices, you cannot make good decisions. And I learned that process. And I want to understand because I want to work with different people in different ways. And I really feel God has given me that opportunity.
Mike, you said something very, very important. The mistake Americans make, or our country makes? We believe, for whatever the reasons, is that our values are universal values. Our values are not universal values. They're not. Every country has their own sets of values, mores, and what they think are important. And we also believe that countries act out of what is good or what is evil. That's not true. All countries, including this country, act out of what is in their best interests.
Right.
That's it.
And we don't like to admit that, but
You don't like to admit it.
Right.
You don't like to admit it. When I hear that we go out there and we try to democratize countries, it's absurd. It's absurd. I mean, look at the debacle of Iraq in 2003.
Right.
We were led, I hate to say this, but we were led by people who never picked up a history book. That's all I can think of. To think that you were going to democratize a country like Iraq
Right.
it's completely absurd. It's
I
completely
understand.
absurd. And we've made that mistake over and over again.
And that mistake is what I'm trying to talk about here in regards to the church. The church doesn't want to make a mistake of Christianizing and getting itself into us and them kind of relationships, because who are you then going to evangelize? You think the secular world is going to listen to someone that hates? Of course not.
No.
And we're supposed to represent the love that's in this world. That's what the Great Commission was about, going out in the spirit of love and talking to people. When you think about who Jesus put together, he had a zealot that he made part of his 12, a religious zealot who really despised Samaritans. Why did Jesus work with these individuals? Because he was bringing us what? Unified, together. He didn't want people to have these Old Testament ideology. Remember, the New Testament brought a whole new concept. And I look at religion progressively. You can't just interpret the Bible from an Old Testament and a New Testament and separate. You got to look at it in a context as a whole. And so I'm really concerned when people bring a passage from the Old Testament, but they don't interpret it also in light of the New, or they cherry pick. I call it.
Yeah, that's where we disagree. Because and the reason that I disagree is because I would ask you is my comment there, and I don't mean to talk about religion or be critical of religion, but nevertheless, I would have to ask that question then: is the Bible the Word of God?
Well, again, now if you're looking at it from a factual history perspective, to my understanding of history, ancient history, and there is a historical Jesus. And the Bible.
I agree with that.
Okay.
I agree wholeheartedly with that. But the point I'm trying to make is if the religious people who believe in the Bible say that it's infallible, it's the Word of God.
Right.
If it's the Word of God, then the Old Testament is in there.
Yes.
And therefore, what you want to sell then is that this God evolved. And so my question would be, what do you mean he evolved?
Right.
He evolved from a vengeful, violent God to one who is not. Why would the God who wrote this book have to evolve? Why wasn't he that way from the beginning? That would be, and that's not cherry picking. I think that's an honest assessment.
Yeah.
And I'm not looking at the Bible from a religious perspective. I'm looking at it from a historical perspective.
So my understanding of that question would be that we're talking about from a human perspective. It looks that way. But it's because of man's fall that created those kind of differences, how God over time got man to see his need of God. And therefore, think about it when you talk about the Old Testament. Why was there a need? Well, God directly spoke through Moses to the people, and yet they rejected him direct. So there were consequences, just like in society there are consequences to behavior. Okay,
I have an issue with that too.
Okay, I understand. In the New Testament, he didn't just speak; he sent his Holy Spirit. So his Spirit resides in those who believe in him, and therefore there is a different motivation to do right. Mm-hmm. In the Old Testament, yes, you just see man was given commands, expected to obey them. Okay, there wasn't an indwelling Holy Spirit, and therefore it was. I think when you're looking at those kind of ideas, they have to develop over time, and it's progressive, not just something that you can say, well, it's a one and done. So you can't take to me, an understanding of what we call the Word of God in one snapshot, as we sometimes do.
Well, that segues into this. Our government is derived by biblical principles. So then I would then ask, well, probably not. I don't see that. And which biblical principles are we talking about? The ones in the Old Testament, the ones in the New. What are we talking about here? Yeah.
Okay. Now, when you ask that question, the principles didn't change. What was wrong in the old is still sin in the new. It's how we approach those. The church approached sin differently than in the Old Testament. There was a community that was expected. Remember, it was a theonomy. They had God as their king, and they rejected that. Once that rejection took place, you notice then what we have is the coming of Christ. So we set up a new economy. It no longer was a legalistic system, it was a spiritual system. And obedience was out of submission.
But
It
don't you
wasn't-
find that to
Go
be
ahead.
very vague for a secular person to try to
Yeah.
say,
Oh,
of course it's
well,
vague.
yeah, I would.
Yeah, I mean, you could poke holes into that all day. Not that it's wrong, but you
Yeah.
can poke holes into that all day.
Understood.
And-
But remember, I accept it by the facts that I don't feel my faith is irrational, but I realize this. Theory and facts go so far. This is where faith comes in. This is where I have to say, well, I believe this, and I'm not going to impose that on you
Right.
because I realize to you it might not make any sense at all. My only, and this is where, going back to our topic, this is where you go from Christianizing, expecting you to follow what I'm saying, and informing you and say, look, make your choice. Here's what and you've allowed me to do this right here and right now in the right spirit. And this is exactly what Elephants in a Room is about.
Sure.
That we can share these deep, sensitive thoughts, and it may be, confusing, it may be difficult to understand, but we're willing to agree to disagree and say, you know what, we'll talk about it again.
Let me ask you though, do you think that the Christian evangelists or the Christian nationalists were instrumental in getting Trump elected?
Well, I'd have to say without a doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when I look at the especially Project 2025, I see that ideology being incorporated into the political. It's not going to be something that we're not going to see again. And there's a 7 Mountains mandate that I literally saw coming for over a decade of that there would be, actually, I myself, prior to what we have today, when I was teaching in a technical college, I followed Francis Schaeffer. Francis Schaeffer was a Christian nationalist. Okay? I taught from his text, how shall we then live? My goal was to, now again, this is where, was I imposing or was I informing? These young college students, they were freshmen, when I was teaching Western civilization and even American history, I wanted them to look at it from a Christian perspective. I wasn't saying, well, be informed.
As your minister, I'd have fired you.
Oh, wow. And so think about the timing. That was part of that same timing that I was really, and I really believe, as we're talking from a spiritual, I believe God put this on my heart to change. So, yes, and to be more open-minded, to be more understanding, to be more, as I probably am more of a pacifist today.
But let me ask you,
Yeah.
don't historians have a duty to teach, I call it real history and not the myth of history? Don't they have a duty to do that?
Yeah, oh, yes, and I think
Sure.
this is what we're open-minded to come in. If you feel that what I talked about, it's a part of history, now, I think I would probably, without a doubt, I would not get into that deep of a conversation in a high school class. I think that would be inappropriate for me to talk about what we just talked about.
Yeah, but
I would not talk about the Holy Spirit in
No.
a high school classroom.
No, but I think what's most important here is that the founding fathers, a lot of them were deists and atheists.
Yes.
I mean, they came from the Anglican
Unitarian,
perspective, but they were men of the Enlightenment period. Their go-to philosophy was reason, not superstition. And if you take a look at Alexander Hamilton, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, they were basically atheists.
But they started out from a Congregationalist perspective.
Of course they did.
They started from a Presbyterian. So they had a religious underpinning,
They
right?
did.
And then
But
they chose,
Talking about evolving, they evolved from that, especially when they were creating a government. Now, when Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence.
Correct.
Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence. He did that and he used the creator, and creator endows you
Right,
to certain
right.
inalienable rights. But he didn't, it wasn't a Christian God, but he did use that type of language. And a lot of Christian nationalists use that and say, see that, we're Christian, we're based on Christian principles. But a real historian will tell you that that was not a document that created a government. That was a proclamation of separation from a king that was appointed by divinity, and you wanted to be able to get popular support behind you, knowing that a lot of the people in 1776 were very religious and read the Bible.
Okay, so let me go ahead and comment on that. That's a really good point. A deist does not believe in a personal God. That God is personally involved. It's like a watchmaker, and there's the clock. It's wound up, and it just goes on and on and on.
George Washington was a deist.
Yes. So therefore, the idea of modern day as a Christian nationalist to insert the evangelical Christianity that we have today, that would not be correct.
Right.
Historically, that. So
Not correct
to be
historically.
fair, I would have to separate what I call evangelical, and actually it's evangelical fundamentalism, because we are going more into a fundamentalistic approach to how we would govern society than we would even with the evangelicals of the 1800. Because remember, in 1800 there was a Great Awakening. So all of a sudden we went from a secular history of America to, in 1800 we would be discussing, oh, hey, guess what? We're evangelizing everybody. Things are changing. We see what Mike's talking about in this conversation about the movement of that spirit now. So from 1800 to say 1860, you had that happening. You've had a roller coaster ride.
Oh, you had the Presbyterians.
Oh, my God.
You had the Anglicans, and you had, what else? You had the Calvinists, and you had the Mormons. It goes on and on.
But think about that. Throughout that history, we constantly see these like a roller coaster. We're reaching its peak, and then we slump down more back into a rational secularism again. Then we have what we would call maybe a revival of some kind, and and this went through the 70s, the 90s, and today we're seeing it again.
Yeah.
So and that's because, from my perspective, I don't ever think that we're going to ever reach, the church is going to reach a perfect society. And yet I think that
The church?
sometimes, we sometimes feel that it's the church that's going to lead us into the future end time events. And I don't see that, and that's a part of Christian nationalism.
Yes.
The church is going to be progressively better. And I wish I could say it was. And that's why I think, from my perspective, it would be better if Christians took care of the church before they tried to Christianize America.
Well, extremism in any dogma is bad. Extremism, you again. I mean, I know some Christians who are extremists, and they're the thing I can say about them, just like an extremist Muslim, is that they're so fixated on the next world that they never learn how to live in this world. And you see it, and you can see it, and that's too bad, because this world is a beautiful world, and there's so much for you to experience and learn and love, and it's too bad that your whole existence is worried about the next world. I find that
and this is why.
I don't find that logical.
No, and I understand where you're coming from, but to me that's religion, and I try to separate that. We've talked about that a lot. I'm looking for a when I say a biblical perspective, right? I'm saying, okay, these are all religious perspectives. I think the church has a responsibility to separate themselves from this myth that you're talking about,
Sure.
and find what works. And it is a combination. It's not living right now in the future. It's how to live now in light of what you know about the future.
Well, I'll say this.
How?
I believe Christianity has evolved from the Middle Ages. Obviously, their history is not good. It's not good. So they've evolved, and I think today Christianity is on the forefront of saying exactly that, that it's government, especially our government here in America, needs to be free from religion in order for you to have freedom of religion. I think they've embraced that concept. I think they did. I think real Christians, I think if you talk to Pope Leo, he would say that.
Well, yeah, and I've heard comments very much like that, and it's like I said, it's not looking at Catholics and Protestants. It's coming up with, okay, who are those that really accept what is faith and define it and are willing to discuss it and say this is what faith is in our century and in the other centuries past. But we have to have an agreement on something. We can't just be so divisive that we can't come to an agreement as to what do we believe as Christians.
Sure.
And,
the better angels of our nature.
And again, that was a great comment.
But let me ask you, where do you think, do you look, our country right now,
Yes.
where do you think, obviously Trump's going to be in office for the next 2.5 years, right? Okay, where do you think our country's going? What do you think? Do you think that the Christian nationalist movement will increase? Do you think there'll be more division between the left and MAGA? Or do you see it coming together a little bit and finding common ground?
Okay, based on what, current reading, based on, what I look at things from my lens, okay, I don't see it in the near future. So, I mean.
Would you blame media for a lot of that?
Well, that's one of my future podcasts. Actually,
Yeah.
I'm thinking fake news. I think the media has distorted. As a matter of fact, I've literally turned off media on any side.
Me too.
I try to read more neutral, like Reuters reports that follow the news, Politico, anything that can be verified, that I can say, I'm using multiple sources, not one source. I don't know if that's going to change. And I'll tell you why. It's too easy to sit in front of a TV set and watch MSNBC, CNN, or Fox News and just regurgitate what these commentators are saying.
Right there.
And oftentimes,
It's not reporting, it's commentary.
it's commentating. And really, you could go, when I say commentating, literally, I mean these commentators are editorial type speakers. They're using rhetoric, and they're using it in a way that is harmful because they're inciting people to react. They're presenting news in such a way that you get angry. They want you to stay angry, and that's what I feel it's happened. There's like, it's called the dark side of rhetoric. When you use rhetoric like the WWE uses their rhetoric to incite people to follow this particular wrestler and and it changes from week to week. And we see this, and yet we're being gullible because we come right back to it.
When news programs went to 24 hours, and then they
Yes.
needed to get sponsorships in order to support financially their news programs, and all of those sponsorships had their own agenda, that was the start of having biased reporting and
Biased
biased
report,
commentary.
yes.
That was the start of it, because you can't lose your sponsor. You don't want to lose your sponsor. And so that's why it's so difficult to get a clear picture of what's happening. I believe we're at war, okay? You can say that we're at war in this country, okay? It's a subtle type of war. But if you've studied war your whole life.
Yeah, I've taken a few courses.
What's the
yeah.
first casualty in war? You know what it is? Truth.
Truth. Yes.
Truth in every war. I get a big kick out of whenever anybody's reading about the Ukrainian-Russian war, and they get news media on reports, and they think it's true. It's not. When you're getting reports out of the Hamas versus the Israeli war, and you're getting reports from that, you think it's true? It's not. I mean, just study wars. We fought in Vietnam for how many years? We thought we were winning. The media report said we were winning, right? And our government knew it was the bright, shining lie, right? That's an example that in war, the first casualty is truth
Correct.
all the time. Not sometimes.
Right.
All the time.
And that's why I feel that I want in this show to guard. Now, remember, you've said this before. You asked me many a times, whose truth?
Yeah, you can't determine.
So at least let us use verifiable facts. That's, to me, in any society that's going awry, the first thing it's going to not want to do is verify facts to see if they're true. It immediately wants people to accept what's really a version of the truth, and it'll include pieces of the truth. But remember, it's not the truth.
It's not the truth.
And if you question them, what are they going to say? They're going to stop people from questioning. And that's leading to me, a very Nazi-oriented
You see
mindset.
that in our country today. You see that in our country today.
So when we say something is like, we're not saying it is, but we can become that.
Right.
And that's the danger that I see. Now, here's something I wanted to bring in before we close. And that's, okay, what is a solution to a lot of our problems? We didn't mention anything about specific beliefs that America's divided over, but we know abortion is one. We know immigration. We know the issues of
You don't get
transgender.
any accurate information on immigration either.
Okay. Now, my perspective is this, and it's built into the Constitution, a citizens' initiative. Rather than having any one party or executive orders dictate, what's going to be the law of the land for whether it's a short period or a long period, right? A citizens' initiative where you would require 67% of Americans to vote. Now, obviously, it's not going to be an issue every day, but these issues like that, I would submit if 67% of the American people, okay, made a decision on any issue, even if I disagreed with that. I realize in a democracy, it's my responsibility then to submit to the will of the people until I can change that will. So, and I know this is maybe a pie in the sky approach, but until Americans really want to make change, a viable solution, and not continue in this political agenda that we are following. And again, I'm not picking any particular parties. I'm saying this is something both parties have to agree upon. Then we may come to a viable solution. But again, I'm throwing something out there that I know may be considered pie in the sky.
I'll tell you what this country needs, okay? And again, I'm going to go back to history. I'll never forget the Battle of Stalingrad, one of the greatest battles in the world.
Yes.
Million
Casualties,
people were dead, okay? And the Russians were just getting their brains beat in.
Correct.
And the commander comes in, he has all his officers lined up. And this has an impact today for us. And the commanding officer says to one of his officers, "What do we need?" And one of the guys says, "We should shoot all the cowards' families." We did that. "What do we need to defeat the Germans?" Goes to the next one. He said, "We should put in prison everybody who refuses to fight." We've already done that. He goes down the line.
Correct.
And everybody comes with a solution. Finally, he goes to the last guy. And the last guy says, "Comrade, we need a hero." That's what we need. That's what this country needs today. We need a hero. We need a hero who's a middle-of-the-road guy who's able to melt both distinct opinions into one and find common ground. That's what this country needs. And until we find that hero, we're going to stay divided.
And the problem is, right now, we're almost replacing that with delusion. So what's taken the place of the hero, it's a delusion that's out there, that we're confusing everybody because we don't have that. And I think when you say define hero so that we know what you're referring to. Is it just someone who takes up a job and completes it, or is there something specific you have in
Well,
mind?
I think it's a person who's articulate, charismatic, and is able to bridge the differences between all sides and find common ground.
Common ground
that all
is different.
sides can agree to. And that's not an easy thing, and that's why that there's so many few heroes around. But there's somebody out there. There is somebody out there that could do it, you know. And I mean, go back in history. The great thing about John F. Kennedy when he was killed was not so much of what he was doing. He did some good things, but the reason is that his promise, the promise of John F. Kennedy, died with him, and he was a potential hero, but the promise of him died. So, and if you go through history, I think people would tell you that Franklin Delano Roosevelt was a hero, how he melted the divide between everybody. And you always have your critics,
Of course.
but I think we need that today.
And Abraham Lincoln, you mentioned earlier.
Abraham Lincoln, absolutely. And you know, those guys are criticized in their time period, but generally speaking, the majority, if you took a popularity poll in those days, you'd have 80% of the people saying, yeah, he's our guy, right? That's unheard of today.
So the beauty of, to me, the hero today is someone who can agree to disagree,
Yeah.
okay, and still stand on their convictions, whether or not the majority of the world listens.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, they're not volatile.
No.
They don't explode, okay, when people disagree with them.
Yeah. You respect all.
We respect all.
You know,
That's the missing jewel that and you could call me an idealist, right? Because I really want to see that happen.
Mm-hmm.
And you just said it. It may never happen.
Yeah, it
But
may
the
never.
idea,
But that's what we need.
That's the ideal.
That's what we need.
Yes.
And
that
here's
goes-
the thing, and I think, and I know we have to end here, but I think that what's so wonderful about your podcast is that, you know, we hit all the areas, we skimmed them all, which is great, which is going to be great for you because as your podcast grows, you're going to be able to hit specific areas of what we've discussed
Oh,
here
yeah.
tonight.
I mean,
and that was the whole point of today.
And that was the whole point.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, even though the topic was, do we Christianize or evangelize? We didn't have to come to a definitive solution.
no.
We agreed that
We skimmed the surface.
yes. And I think we informed the audience. I hope the audience feels informed as a result of our discussion. I hope that everybody sees that it was civil.
So when's your
I
next podcast, The Elephant in the Room?
That's a good question. I hope to be consistent. I hope to have the next podcast at the end of November. And two possible topics that I'm flirting with was the misinformation, and that would not be as much of a religious, political, but it would be social, right?
Yeah, and that would
the
be
other-
very interesting because I think people need to know and understand just how much misinformation there is out there, and you're not really getting the truth on it.
Yeah.
And you
And,
know,
and give them some
and you-
principles as to how. We hit the surface of, well, making sure we verify facts.
Yeah.
And how do we verify facts? Which sources? I want to give them that kind of information so that they're taking something away. My goal is that my audience and your audience, because we have your podcast is something that we both are on. So we're going to have some of the same viewers.
Yeah.
That when they walk away from our discussions, okay, they have something to walk away with.
well, I like listening I'll listen to your next podcast, and the reason being is because obviously I always look for credentials of people whenever you're discussing this, and you know your credentials speak for itself, and also the people that you have on here. I've seen your list; their credentials speak for themselves too. So I'm really interested in listening to your next podcast, and I do want to say that I really appreciate you asking me on here for your first podcast. I really appreciated it because I love talking about it.
Yeah.
Obviously, my background isn't as strong as yours or anybody else you're going to have
Well,
on this,
no,
but I
I
am
don't
a
feel
student
that.
of these times. I'm a
You
student
definitely
of
are a
these times.
student.
So,
And you bring that challenge that I wanted. So I do appreciate it. Your office is, I respect it. And again, 50 years, you have become like a brother in many ways to me because a lot of things we have in common, and even in our differences, even in our differences, we have never departed from that friendship.
Right.
It's never been really strained. That's great.
And you know what we're going to do now, Mike? It's
that?
a part of Americana right now. We're going to go into the pickle bar here, and we're going to have a Coke and a sandwich, and we're going to watch two things. We're going to watch the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the NFL football game, and we're
right.
going to watch Game 7 between the Toronto Mariners and the Seattle Mariners. Toronto Blue Jays, I'm sorry, and the Seattle Mariners, right? That's what we're going to do. It doesn't get anything more American than that.
Thank you.
Thanks,
you,
guys.
We all know there's an advantage to being the home team, to playing at home. And at LGKG, we have been your home team for over 90 years.
We're more than just a law firm. We're your friends, your neighbors, an advocate when life takes an unexpected turn.
We're not just lawyers that practice law. We live in this community, just like you.
When you need us most, we're at our best.